Ladies and gentlemen, NBs and the infinite spectrum in between, this is Envoy of Kairos, and I'm back with my greatest speed paint of all time. My last Fandom speed paint, I struggled with a Pokemon piece of myself and a full team. I've now applied those techniques, and several others, into a piece far better than anything I've made in my lifetime. And this time, it's a tribute to what has to be another of the greatest game franchises in the world, and another I have a lifetime of experience with. With Kirby and the Forgotten Land on the way, I had to make a tribute to the tough pink puff dominating his entourage of eldritch enemies. So, for this image, I gathered a collection of what I consider to be the top 8. So, who did I pick and why? Well, front and center, of course, is Kirby preparing to face them all down. But the central opponent is the current ultimate villain of the Kirby franchise, Void Termina. I had to properly represent Kirby's apparent past life and culmination of an entire franchise of bosses. And lore-wise, Void Termina is my favorite boss in the entire series. He really feels like the end of an era with Kirby, and seeing his star allies was the last before going fully 3D, I suppose he was. We'll just have to see how the first final boss of 3D Kirby really goes for us, huh? But when it comes to rendering Void Termina, I'd say his feathers were the most obnoxious part, by far. But it was kind of fun figuring out how to sneak in Void's true form, peeking out from the neck hole under the mask. Moving on, we have in the background, cloaks spread and backing our entire collective of foes, Nightmare. Representing the start and the end of 2D Kirby at once, bringing back his original final boss in all his campy glory. Nightmare in Dreamland was actually the second Kirby game I played, and we'll get to my first shortly, but this one had an impact on me. And I love the music throughout the franchise from Origins to modern day thanks to this game. Now, the Dark Lord of Dreams is here to face Kirby once more, but considering how long he's been out of the game and outclassed, I think his role in this battle will be a supporting one. Rendering him was pretty easy. He's got a rather simple design, but we still love him for it. On the left then, we have a mid-lane boss among the timeline, Magolor. Kirby's Return to Dreamland was a masterpiece, and the betrayal of Magolor was expertly crafted, as was his entire battle. Not to mention, by the background music I'm using for this, I'm sure you can already tell how much I love the soundtrack that accompanied him. Crowned is one of the greatest pieces in Kirby history, and Magolor is one of the greatest bosses I've ever faced. I can only hope Forgotten Land's final boss can remotely match up to such greatness. As for rendering him, getting the gold on his jewelry was particularly obnoxious with its odd shape, the crown especially. That took me a good long while. The wings I just had a blast recreating. I love how they're rendered. Admittedly, I did use a brush for the magic circle pattern, and it wasn't even a magic circle brush. That's actually a radial fractal code brush from a Digimon-themed set. You might have noticed me using that in one of my Digimon speed paints for my original adult levels for my Maneki Neko-based line. So, behind Magolor, we have one of the most cherished final bosses of the franchise, and the second oldest in this cast, Zero 2. If I had to pick any form of Zero to represent, I had to make it the creepiest and latest one. So, here he is, and by the end of this video, you'll see I've done some haunting things with him. The bleeding eye remains, of course, but also imagining the red parts of his wings as massive, fleshy tendrils, covering them in dark vessels and angling them like tentacles poised to impale. His halo, meanwhile, got a nice creepy twist with its final render as well, and I can't wait to see people's reactions to that. My history with O2 is an interesting one, though. You know how I said Nightmare in Dreamland was my second Kirby game? Well, Crystal Shards was my first, and I absolutely loved it. I didn't even own my own physical copy for a good long while. I rented this game repeatedly. I then dominated O2 after a bit of horrified mumbling, since I was kinda young and O2 is just creepy, even in his original blocky form. My first real final boss experience with any game, and still one I cherish. Underneath Magalore is a very recent one, from my absolute favorite Kirby game, Planet Robobot. Star Dream was an interesting twist of a final boss, especially revealing its true form in the third phase and really throwing the series' lore for a loop with its implications. Not the best final boss by far, but one that really did satisfy me, especially being a longtime Gurren Lagann fan, and all the heavy references to it made in this final boss. As for rendering him, yeah, I gotta say he was one of the easiest here, but nonetheless very impressive results. The other easy one in this piece is in the opposite corner, the magnificence of Darkmind. I've rendered him in his third phase form, just a giant fiery eye of pure malevolent energy, ready to tear anyone and everyone apart with lasers and spatial anomalies. Rendering fire is always an interesting process, something new with it every time, and always a new trick to make it look just a little better. In this case, I made sure to use an overlaid cloud layer to apply a texture to his corona that really makes it look like an organic version of the original game sprites. In the corner below Darkmind, we have the remaining 3DS final boss, Queen Sectonia. Seeing how connected these two are, I simply had to place them close to one another. Her envy and narcissism really made for a thematically different opponent for the series, and her design is among the most unique in the series. We have one royal already, but she's the one that really screams royalty on sight. She's really not afraid to throw down and use the godlike power so many kings and queens act like they have, because she actually has it. Rendering her properly took a lot of trial and error with her wings, and her heart-shaped gems. And of course, her frilled collar took forever to complete. But I do love how she came out in the end, so it was worth all the effort. Lastly, between Sectonia and Darkmind, we have the secret superboss badass, Galacta Knight. This man is as overpowered as can be, a monstrosity that had to be locked up repeatedly in any attempt to save the world from his endless wrath. Truly the most vicious warrior the universe has to offer, and one of the worthiest fights Kirby and Meta Knight have ever undertaken, time and time again now. His design is simple, but that simplicity allows for him to be a fast-paced juggernaut with no remorse or restraint. Rendering his armor with more oddly shaped metal, especially with stainless steel reflecting very differently from gold, was a unique undertaking for me, but one I conquered regardless. Far more difficult to conquer is the demon fluttering about at his side. We all see you, Morpho. You'll never trust a butterfly in a Kirby game again. Lastly, there's Kirby himself. When completing the render, I wanted to do something special with him. I wanted to make him look as powerful and godly as he really is. As a good incarnate of Void, a being that gives as much as it's taken, I wanted to present him as a galaxy of power packed into a single body, and embodying what a black hole at the center of a galaxy does. So, I rendered a bright pink galaxy to overlay with him, and it almost harkens back to his look as Supernova Kirby in Triple Deluxe. And of course, I couldn't send him into such a massive battle without the Warp Star to back him up. And so, it's complete. With some black flames pouring between Void's fingers and some radial shading to make everything further from Kirby look just a bit darker, then erasing any part of it over their glowing bits and eyes, I've made what I consider my greatest piece to date. And just in time, too. I'm writing this script on the night of the 23rd, just a day and a half before Forgotten Lands is out. So you can expect that the first episode of my playthrough is going to be up just half an hour after this, actually. So, if you like this, go give my playthrough a look too. For now though, I have to consider what my original speed paint for the next 2 weeks will be. Not time for another Unleashed for my book yet, and I'm out of dormant form characters. At least ones that I'm willing to reveal. So maybe I'll try something regarding that RPG I want to make. Well, we'll get to that later. This is Envoy of Kairos, signing out, and I'll see you all again very soon at the start of my Kirby and the Forgotten Land playthrough. Later, guys. Hey, thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed the video, then be sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. And if you're looking to support me a little further, maybe get some bonus content, or just keep up with me and other fans, you can find links down in the description leading to my Patreon, my Discord, and my Twitter. And if you're following me on Patreon, then you can expect some content polls to decide what's coming up on the channel yet. A little bit of background additions to some other series I've been working on, some more original and creative stuff. And who knows, if enough of you start supporting me soon, I might have a few other surprises up my sleeve too. Again, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you all again on the next video.